the unlived life is an interesting one to pull back on. And so Jung basically, he thought he wrestled with Christianity, wrestled with this idea of it only having this pure image. He deeply disliked the idea of like the Messiah complex, of pedestaling anyone, that it was all supposed to be self-referential. It's all supposed to be about conquering ourselves, our inner demons, our shadows, and so forth. And so he wrote this amazing book called Answer to Job towards the end of his kind of professional life. And in it, he took the parable of Job, which is, for people that don't know, the story where the devil basically shows up and says, these people are only following you because you're nice to them. And God's like, no, it's not. That's not the case. And he's like, I guarantee you they'll stop following you if you started, to treat them badly. And he's like, no, I'll prove it. So he picks Job, who's his most loyal, most devoted servant, and slowly and absolutely brutally, in only sort of the Old Testament way, destroys this man's life. He takes away his animals, his farm, famine, children, I think maybe eventually his wife, pestilence, just everything basically. And so the whole parable is Job basically saying like, why God, why? And God just keeps handing him savage smackdowns. And I don't think he ever breaks. I don't think he breaks. I think he commits all the way through. But a lot of people look at this parable and just look at it as like Old Testament evil. Again, I think going literal with it rather than the meta piece of it. But what Jung did was basically use it to show his theory that, and it's quite something, that he believes that God is essentially unconscious of his own shadow. And that the purpose of humans and human suffering is to show God his own shadow of causing pain and suffering, and that the countering value of humanity, the countering force, is to essentially ennoble themselves through suffering and pain and make God conscious of and aware of his actions. Which is a really, it became like this very dicey idea to put out there, because obviously the Christians believe that God's omnipotent, that there isn't anything that, benevolent, right? That it's anything they wouldn't know. But I kind of like it as an idea. I think it's a really, really, really interesting concept. It's a bit frightening.
Well, it mirrors a bit of the Greco-Roman ideas that we're here as the playthings of the gods.
Yeah. But then it kind of elevates us, because it's like, God made man in his image.
But image of the shadow or image of the light? Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah. But we're here to play with both, right? So it's kind of a fascinating idea to sit with.
And why has all this spoken to you?
Well, I mean,
because for as long as I've known you, you've had an interest in psychology. Let's say is a very broad term for it. Myth.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would fall in the category of someone that's kind of described and spoken about a lot in sort of Donald Cowshed's book of Trauma and the Soul. I think I experienced, very, very, very difficult first few years into life in terms of this kind of affect regulation and mediation. I think that as a result, became a very performance achievement oriented person. So, when you become, financially and business successful, people aren't really pointing towards these things in you. But it became very clear to me from like my mid-20s onwards that I was just suffering from like a severe sense of hollowness and emptiness that other people weren't. And then latterly, like quite significant like intrapersonal relating difficulties with romantic partners. And yeah, like very difficult psychosomatic issues with like strong sense of disassociation and sleep issues and so forth. So and then yeah, to Donald Cowshed's theory that like people with those kind of primal ruptures in their psyche develop a strong affinity for things beyond the mundane of life. Like you you can't really get too fussed about talking about, I don't know, Love Island or whatever on the
Yeah.
TV, as good as that is. The psyche is just like operating at a different level. It's operating because this is where I feel safe at the deeper level. Um, and that makes a lot of sense, right? I didn't feel safe when I was 3 years old in the earthly world,
Hmm.
so I'm kind of still stuck, if you like,
Hmm.
swimming in this kind of mythopoetic soup, and I'm still working through this kind of affect management and mediation to kind of like rebirth um, into normality. So
No, you said, yeah,
that's
but you
where
had
we
also
are.
said that you saw that show up. There was a girl that you were dating who, when she was close to you, you felt that your HRV, your heart rate
Yes,
variability, according
improved.
to
Yeah,
your aura ring,
yeah,
was improved,
for
right?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, perfect
and
example of it.
that would be representative of what you're describing. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And this stuff takes a really long time to both identify that you have, to not feel like incredibly ashamed of, because a
Hmm.
lot of people with trauma have like complex relationships towards that and towards their primary caregivers about it, and then also to face the pain of actually confronting it, because it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant at all. I can tell you that. It's agonizing therapy. Like a lot of the examples in this book I was reading, people are in therapy for like 5, 6, 7 years. Sometimes 2, 3 times a week, going through truly horrific, memories of things that were just too difficult to experience. So, yeah, I have a lot of compassion for people that go through these experiences and come out the other side of it. But they also have a lot of gifts to give, which is
Hmm.
great. And I think Young did. I don't think Young even realized what he was in. I mean, that's just the true bravery of him as a person, that none of this even existed before he came along. So he was
Can put
truly in,
words to it. Yeah.
exactly, truly in the wilderness, that man. So yeah,
Well, how do you think about Jordan Peterson's work? Because he's taken a lot of Jung's themes and concepts and expanded on them or brought them, into the 21st century for people.
yeah, yeah. He's a complex individual. I think, funnily enough, an artist friend of mine, when he was kind of breaking through in sort of 2013, 14, 15, said something really interesting about him, which is that he didn't feel like he had an integrated lover archetype. And at the time, I was kind of really taken by his strength of word and kind of
Hmm.
uh, repopularization of a lot of these myths and so forth, and helping young men find direction,
Hmm.
where we're living in a society where there aren't a lot of good role models around. There aren't a lot of men, fathers around, period, because they're working quite hard. So men are mostly being raised by women, which is problematic for adolescence and beyond, not so much in the early life. But the longer his time and tenure has gone on in the
Spotlight.
public spotlight, the
Yeah.
more I've revisited this remark that my artist friend said, and the more I think it's true. I think that there's a deep disconnection to sensitivity and compassion in this man. And it's not that he's incapable of these things. In fact, funnily enough, you see him kind of blubbering quite a bit when people come up to him and thank him, and he becomes overwhelmed by the support and service that he's given. It's the kind of like the weaponization, I think, of some of his words and the way in which he goes after certain people. I think that there's struggle that I have with the kind of the embodiment of Christ consciousness within it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very, 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 very interesting and very telling that a man of his intellectual accomplishment and reading has been suffering from very profound depression for several decades and has been medicating that. And for a man that studies Jung, has seen what he's done, to not see the value in descending into that depression himself and coming out the other side really points at something for me. I think that the descent is where his like Miss Lover archetype is, and I think that there's something massively awry with that. And I never ever ever judge anyone for taking antidepressants. I've taken them in my life to get through truly hellish experiences, but they're not the long-term solution. And the long-term solution is to descend into the madness and to come out and get the gifts from it. And I don't think until you do so, you're whole. And I think that you pass that on to future generations. You know, as the Bible says, right, the sins of the father become the sins of the son.
Sevenfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 generations.